The afternoon sun was a pale, sickly yellow, casting long, skeletal shadows across the marble floors of my father's foyer. Sundays were the longest days. At 1 p.m. sharp, my father would leave for the club, his leather loafers clicking with a sense of purpose I never felt. I was 19, a sophomore in college, back for a summer that felt like a prison sentence. The house was a masterpiece of glass and stone, but it had no soul. Ever since Elena moved in 2 years ago, the air had grown thick with things left unsaid. She was 32, vibrant, and strikingly beautiful, a sharp contrast to the cold, calculated world my father built. We existed like two celestial bodies in the same orbit, always aware of each other, but never touching. I spent the afternoon trying to read in my room, but the silence of the house was distracting. It was the kind of silence that makes you hear your own pulse. I remembered my gym bag. I had left it in the basement laundry room after my workout on Friday. The walk to the basement felt like entering another world. As I descended the wooden stairs, the temperature dropped. The scent of the upstairs expensive wax and lila was replaced by the damp, metallic smell of the lower level. I reached the bottom step and stopped. A sliver of warm, golden light was cutting across the dark concrete floor. The laundry room door was ajar. I stood there for what felt like an hour, watching the steam drift out of the crack in the door, my heart beginning a slow, heavy rhythm. I pushed the door open. The hinges didn't scream. They gave a low, satisfied sigh. The room was filled with the scent of lavender and the intense heat of the industrial dryer. Elena was there. She was standing by the folding table, her back to me. She had discarded her silk blouse on the floor. Dear listeners, before I began telling this complicated story of my life, I ask you to support my channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and write the comment which city you are listening from. This is very important for us, and now, enjoy listening. I didn't move. I couldn't move. I watched the way the fluorescent light caught the curve of her shoulders. The washing machine was mid-cycle. A rhythmic slosh thump, that seemed to sync with my breathing. She knew I was there. I saw her reflection in the small, high-up window. She didn't startle. She didn't reach for her clothes. She slowly turned her head, her eyes meeting mine through the humid air. The power dynamic of stepmother and son vanished in that single look. She turned around fully, her movements slow and deliberate, like a predator who knew the prey had nowhere to go. She walked toward me, her heels making a sharp, final sound on the concrete. She didn't stop until she was inches away, her heat radiating against my chest. She reached past me, her silk-soft skin grazing my arm, and pushed the heavy door shut. Click. The sound of the deadbolt engaging felt like the end of my old life. "Do you like what you see, Leo?" she whispered. Her voice wasn't the polite, distant tone she used at dinner. It was a low, resonant vibration that I felt in my bones. She confessed that she had been waiting for me to follow her. She told me how she watched me from the upstairs window, how she noticed the way I looked away when our eyes met. She was tired of being a trophy. She wanted to be a secret. Act 3. The breaking of the bloodline, the heat of the dryer against my back, the smell of her skin, the forbidden thrill that made every touch feel like a lightning strike. She pushed me against the vibrating machine. The metal was hot, vibrating through my spine. "Your father built this house to hide in," she murmured, her hands finding the hem of my shirt. "But in this room, there is nowhere to hide." Every boundary we had respected for 2 years was systematically dismantled in the windowless basement. Time didn't exist. There was no wrong or right, only the urgent, undeniable reality of the present. We weren't just breaking rules. We were creating a new, dark alliance. She told me things she had never told my father, her regrets, her hungers, her fears. We were bound together by the heat and the steam. By the time the final spin cycle of the washing machine ended, the silence that followed was deafening. We were no longer who we were when I first walked through that door. The dryer buzzer went off, a long, harsh drone that signaled the end of our stolen time. Elena pulled away, her expression shifting instantly back to that of the composed, elegant woman my father married. She stood before the small basement mirror, fixing her hair with a terrifying efficiency. Go upstairs, Leo. Wash your face. Don't look at me when your father comes home, she said, her voice back to that polite, hollow hum. I walked up the stairs, the cool air of the main floor feeling like a slap in the face. When my father returned, talking about his successful afternoon at the club, I sat across from him. And Elena at dinner, I watched her pour his wine. I watched her smile at his jokes. She looked at me once, a deep, burning look that lasted only a fraction of a second, before turning back to her husband. I realized then that the true heart story wasn't about a single afternoon. It was about the fact that from that day forward, the most important part of our lives would always happen in the dark, behind a locked laundry room door. Next morning, the morning sun felt like an interrogation lamp. I sat at the mahogany dining table, my eyes fixed on my coffee cup. The house was back to its perfect state. My father was reading the Wall Street Journal, the crisp snap of the paper sounding like a gunshot in the quiet room. Then Elena walked in. She was wearing a high-collared white dress, her hair in a perfect bun. She looked like a saint. Good morning, Leo, she said, her voice steady and hollow. She leaned over to pour my father's orange juice, and for a split second, her hand brushed against mine on the table. It wasn't an accident. It was a reminder. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I didn't look up. I realized then that the hardest part wasn't what happened in the basement. It was acting like it never happened at all. The following week was a slow torture of near misses. We developed a language of glances and subtle movements. At dinner, she would talk about the weather, while her foot pressed against mine under the table. When my father left for his evening cigar on the patio, she would linger in the hallway, just long enough for me to smell her perfume. The house was no longer a home. It was a minefield of hidden desires. Every time the phone rang or a floorboard creaked, I thought the secret was out. The psychological weight began to change me. I grew quiet, distant, and obsessed with the moments we were alone. 10 days after the laundry room incident, I found a small, folded piece of paper tucked into the book I was reading in the library. The basement light is broken. 11 p.m. My father went to bed at 10:30 p.m. like clockwork. Waiting for the clock to strike 11 was the longest hour of my life. I crept down the stairs in the dark, my bare feet silent on the cold wood. I didn't need a light. I knew the way by heart now. I reached the laundry room, and the door was already open. The air was cool this time. The machines were silent, but the tension was 10 times stronger than before. Elena was waiting in the dark. She didn't say a word. She just grabbed the front of my shirt and pulled me into the room. This wasn't a discovery anymore. It was an addiction. She confessed that she couldn't sleep, that the house felt like a tomb when I wasn't near her. She told me that my father had started asking why. She seemed so distracted. We were playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were rising. The thumbnail moment occurred when we heard a floorboard creak directly above U's father's bedroom. We froze. Our breathing stopped, held in a terrifying, electric silence for 5 minutes, until the house settled again. As the weeks turned into a month, the laundry room wasn't enough. We began to take risks that were bordering on insanity. a quick encounter in the pantry. While my father was washing his car in the driveway, a shared look in the rearview mirror during a family drive. Elena was changing. She was becoming more daring, almost as if she wanted to get caught. "He doesn't see us, Leo," she whispered one afternoon in the garage. "He only sees what he wants to see." I started to realize that this wasn't just about me. It was her way of rebelling against the life my father had trapped her in. I was the weapon she was using to destroy his perfect world. The climax of part 2 happens on a rainy Tuesday. My father came home early, because his meeting was cancelled. He walked through the front door, just as I was coming up from the basement, breathless and disheveled. Elena followed a moment later, carrying a basket of clean laundry that was actually empty. My father looked at us for a long, silent minute. The tension in the hallway was thick enough to choke on. "Why are you both in the basement?" he asked, his voice low and suspicious. My heart stopped. Elena didn't blink. She gave him that perfect, distant smile and said, "The dryer was acting up again, dear. Leo was helping me fix it." He stared at her, then at me, and finally nodded. "Good son," he said, patting my shoulder. That "good son" felt like a knife in my gut. The act ends with Elena and me alone in the kitchen, late at night. The rain is still pouring outside. She looks at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of triumph and fear. "He's starting to suspect," I whispered. "Let him," she replied, her voice cold. "He built this house. It's time he saw what's living inside the walls." I realized then that there was no going back. We were on a collision course. Sound of a car pulling into the driveway at 2 a.m. Guest we weren't expecting. The secret was about to get much more complicated. The headlight beams cut through the rain like searchlights, sweeping across my bedroom ceiling. It was 2:15 a.m. A car door slammed. I crept to the window and saw my father's younger brother, Uncle Marcus, standing on the porch. Marcus was a private investigator, man paid to see things others missed. My blood turned to ice. My father met him at the door. I stood at the top of the stairs, invisible in the shadows. "I need to stay for a few weeks," Marcus said, his voice gravelly. "I've got a case in the city." He looked up the stairs, and for a second, I felt his eyes lock onto mine in the dark. Elena appeared from her room, wrapped in a silk robe, her face a mask of perfect hospitality. But when our eyes met, over my father's shoulder, I saw it. Panic. The next week was a nightmare. Marcus didn't leave the house. He sat in the living room with his laptop, but his eyes were always moving. He noticed the way Elena's hand lingered when she handed me a plate. He noticed the way I avoided the basement. The laundry room, our sanctuary, was now a danger zone. Marcus started doing his own laundry. He was marking his territory. He knew something was rotting in the heart of this perfect family, and he was circling us like a shark. 3 days into Marcus's stay, I found a note in the usual spot. "He knows. We have to end this tonight." Basement. Midnight. I went down at 11:55 p.m. The basement felt like a tomb. When I entered the laundry room, Elena was already there, but she was shaking. "He's been following me, Leo," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He told me he saw us in the garage last week. We were cornered. She suggested we run that. We leave my father and the house behind." The obsession had turned into a frantic, desperate need for survival. The thumbnail moment happened as we stood in the center of the laundry room. The door didn't just open, it was kicked. Marcus was there. He didn't have a camera or a phone. He just had a look of disgust. "I knew you were a snake, Elena," he growled, "but I didn't think you'd take the boy down with you." He looked at me, his eyes full of pity. Your father is upstairs, Leo. What do you think he'll do when I tell him his good son has been in the basement every night? The tension in that small, humid room was suffocating. Elena stepped forward, her fear turning into a cold, sharp anger. She told Marcus that if he told my father, she would burn the whole family down. She knew Marcus had been skimming money from the family business for years. It was a stalemate. A dark bargain, struck in the steam of the laundry room. Marcus agreed to stay silent, but on one condition: I had to leave. Tonight, I was to transfer to a university across the country and never return to this house while my father was alive. The price of our secret was exile. Elena looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see the fire of desire. I saw the cold ash of a dream that had turned into a nightmare. We had traded our love for our lives. The story ends with me standing on the driveway at dawn, a single suitcase in my hand. My father was at the door, confused, believing the lie Elena had spun about an emergency internship in California. He hugged me, telling me how proud he was of his successful son. As I pulled away in my car, I looked at the basement window one last time. Elena was standing there, a ghost behind the glass. We had gotten away with it, but the cost was everything. I drove toward the highway, the sun rising over a life I no longer recognized. The true heart story wasn't about the laundry room anymore. It was about the fact that some secrets don't just change your life, they end it.